In October 1943, Caporal Maggiore Giorgio Rossi arrived at Camp Hereford, Texas, as part of a group of 300 Italian prisoners of war. Having surrendered in Sicily, Rossi had expected brutal treatment based on fascist propaganda. Instead, his journey from Algiers included clinical processing, hot soup, and Red Cross parcels. Hereford, a camp of barracks surrounded by wire and guard towers, offered a surprising lack of hostility from American guards. Rossi and fellow artilleryman Sergeant Bruno Conti observed the calm demeanor of their captors. An American captain and Italian-speaking liaison officers briefed the new arrivals. Geneva Convention standards would be upheld, offering privileges for cooperation and solitary confinement for resistance. Rossi's group was assigned to Barracks 7, a clean, well-appointed structure that contrasted sharply with his wartime living conditions in Sicily. That evening, a whistle summoned them to the mess hall. The mess hall was an astounding sight for Rossi. The aroma of roasted meat, fresh bread and vegetables filled the air. This was a stark departure from the meager rations of the Italian army. He received a tray piled high with mashed potatoes, buttered green beans, pot roast, bread, an apple, and coffee, more food than he'd seen since 1940. Caporale Matteo Esposito, a younger prisoner, whispered, "Questo è impossibile." Fascist propaganda had depicted a starving America, yet here they were, prisoners of war, eating meals better than most Italian officers. Rossi ate cautiously, suspecting a trap. However, the other prisoners devoured their food without incident, and American soldiers ate the same portions at separate tables, displaying no hierarchy or suspicion. Later, they received personal items: soap, a toothbrush, a razor, writing paper, and a New Testament. The ivory soap, a luxury in wartime Italy, symbolized the unexpected provision. That night, discussions in the barracks ranged from Conti's skepticism about the permanence of these conditions to Esposito's tearful realization that he had never eaten so well. The following morning, work details were announced. Men with agricultural experience, mechanics and craftsmen, could apply for jobs on local farms, in the camp motor pool, or in town businesses, earning camp scrip redeemable for goods. Rossi, a former vineyard worker, volunteered for agricultural labor. 3 days later, he and 5 other Italian POWs were driven to Clarence Webb's farm by Webb himself, with a single unarmed young guard. Webb, a weathered man in denim overalls, explained the sugar beet harvest through gestures and the guard's translation. Rossi found a familiar rhythm in the work, his hands recalling his youth despite the different Texas soil. The prisoners labored with focused intensity, grateful for purpose. At noon, Mrs. Webb brought sandwiches, pickles, boiled eggs, and cookies, serving them with a smile that transcended language barriers. The prisoners ate in the barn's shade while the guards smoked, observing a hawk overhead. No chains, no weapons, just lunch in a Texas field. Returning to camp, Rossi felt an unexpected sense of normalcy and utility. He was treated not as a captured soldier, but as a valuable laborer. A significant shift occurred in late October when 30 Hereford townspeople, civilians in their Sunday best, arrived at the camp gate. Colonel Morrison, the camp commander, welcomed them. Rossi watched as these townspeople, including shopkeepers, housewives, and farmers, entered the camp itself, an unprecedented act, as civilian prisoner fraternization was strictly forbidden in European POW camps. They set up tables and opened boxes, revealing donations, books in Italian and English, soccer balls, baseball gloves, a chess set, playing cards, writing supplies, and even a phonograph with Verdi operas and American jazz. Mayor Clifton, speaking through a translator, addressed the prisoners. He emphasized that they were soldiers, not criminals, and that the war had placed them on opposing sides due to nationality and history. The citizens of Hereford believed in treating all men with dignity and offered work opportunities in town. Further donations of recreational materials would be monthly, and letters to families in Italy would be facilitated. Hereford, he declared, welcomed them as temporary residents. Rossi was deeply moved. This wasn't the America of fascist propaganda, a cruel, hateful nation. These people, despite Italy's wartime aggression, showed immense kindness, extending hands across the barbed wire. That night, Rossi struggled to write to his wife in Florence. Censors would read every word, making it impossible to convey the truth, that his captors fed him better than his own army, that American civilians brought gifts, that he worked and earned wages, and that the enemy was not what he had been taught. He described the camp neutrally, mentioning his safety and health, but the profound contradiction burned within him. He sealed the letter, pondering how America's treatment of its prisoners undermined Italy's cause. Other prisoners, equally troubled, wrote their own letters. Sergeante Conti sat on his bunk, unmoving, holding an Italian translation of Mark Twain. In the weeks that followed, the town's engagement deepened. A Catholic priest from Hereford conducted monthly masses. Local women organized a Christmas package drive, delivering hand-knitted scarves and socks. The Hereford High School band performed a concert, including Italian folk songs. Prisoners with artistic skills painted murals in the town library for real wages. Enzo Moretti, a former stonemason, repaired a Baptist church foundation guarded by a napping deputy. The lines between captor and captive blurred. Rossi learned English words from Webb: dirt, sky, water, harvest. Mrs. Webb sent him home with leftover biscuits, and the young guard, Jimmy, shared his coffee. For Rossi's November birthday, Webb gave him a pocket knife, a gesture that left him speechless. By December, almost 200 prisoners worked in Hereford and surrounding farms, repairing machinery, harvesting crops, and maintaining buildings, filling the labor void left by the draft. They were paid, fed, and treated as human beings. This inexorably shifted Rossi's worldview. He realized fascism's promises of greatness had delivered only deprivation and death, while America, the supposed enemy, demonstrated a generosity that shamed his former loyalties. He thought of his wife in Florence under German occupation, his hungry sons, and his own incongruous existence as a pampered POW in Texas. The contradiction was immense, but he accepted it day by day, kindness by kindness, until his former self became a faded memory. As Christmas packages arrived, Rossi understood he could no longer believe the ideology that had led him to war. Hereford, Texas, had shattered every lie with its actions. He resolved that upon his return to Italy, he would teach his sons that the world was not divided into good and evil nations, but into people who chose kindness and people who chose cruelty. America had made its choice, and that choice had transformed him forever. Rossi, an Italian POW, and 15 others hesitated outside the white-clappered Methodist church. Mrs. Eleanor Harrison, the grain merchant's wife, warmly ushered them in. The congregation welcomed them, rising as they filled the back pews. After the service, families extended dinner invitations. Rossi accepted one from the Johnsons, a farming family whose son served with Patton's Third Army. At their table, Mr. Johnson inquired about Rossi's family in Bologna and shared photos of his own son in uniform. This paradox, a man whose son fought Rossi's former allies, yet offered roast beef with genuine concern for his well-being, paralyzed Rossi. Mrs. Johnson served warm apple pie, 3 generous slices on real china plates. Rossi recalled his mother's last letter, detailing watered-down soup and sawdust-tasting bread. In the camp recreation hall, Rossi spent evenings with American magazines like Life and the Saturday Evening Post. He observed images of American factories endlessly producing tanks, aircraft, and ships. Rome's propaganda newsreels had dismissed this industrial capacity as a weakness, a soulless mechanization. Rossi now understood the critical miscalculation his former commanders had made. One issue showcased liberated Italian cities, rubble, skeletal buildings, and hollow-eyed civilians. The caption highlighted Allied relief efforts, food, medical supplies, reconstruction materials. Sergente Paolo Marchetti, a Sicilian captured at Kasserine Pass, pointed to a photograph of Palermo. "My sister writes they receive American Red Cross packages," Marchetti whispered. "Powdered milk, canned meat, chocolate for the children, more than Mussolini ever provided." The words hung, dangerous and undeniable. Thursday evenings featured English classes with Miss Patricia Reeves, a retired schoolteacher. She patiently taught grammar and corrected pronunciation without mockery. Rossi grappled with idioms like raining cats and dogs and break a leg, and Miss Reeves explained them with a laugh. He read simplified American novels, struggling with descriptions of baseball and county fairs, concepts as alien as the language itself. Other POWs attended vocational classes, welding, carpentry, auto repair. The camp provided tools, materials, and instruction superior to Italian technical schools. Caporale Luca Ferrara learned advanced welding, planning to open a shop in Italy or Texas after the war, funded by his 80 cents a day wages. The camp store, open daily at 0800, amazed Rossi with its abundance. Shelves were laden with Hershey's chocolate, Camel cigarettes, Coca-Cola, shaving cream, toothpaste, writing paper, and toiletries, quantities unimaginable in Italy. POWs spent their earnings buying items for themselves or to send home in Red Cross packages. Rossi bought 3 chocolate bars for his niece, costing 60 cents, almost a full day's wage, but her imagined smile justified the expense. He also purchased Wrigley's chewing gum, a novelty in America. These simple commercial transactions felt like a return to normal civilian life. Private Henderson, the young store clerk, chatted about the weather and Rossi's farm work, making change without suspicion or hostility, just mundane human commerce. Saturday nights transformed the recreation hall into a dance venue. The camp commander permitted Italian music performances. Rossi played mandolin, Ferrara accordion, and Marchetti violin. They performed traditional songs like O Sole Mio, entertaining American guards and their wives and girlfriends. This music bridged the war's divide. Afterward, the camp phonograph played American swing. Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, and some POWs learned the jitterbug from American couples. Rossi watched this cultural exchange with wonder. Reich propaganda had depicted Americans as culturally bankrupt, yet their music radiated infectious joy, their dances a revolutionary freedom. When a guard's wife asked Rossi to dance, he clumsily accepted, stumbling while she laughed and guided him. This moment encapsulated the flaws in the ideology he had long embraced. Medical care, contrary to Rossi's expectations as a prisoner, was not brutal. Captain Morrison, the camp dentist, examined all POWs within their first month. Rossi needed 2 fillings, performed with anesthetic and modern equipment. Captain Morrison explained each procedure, treated him professionally, and provided aspirin. Rossi contrasted this with North African army dentists who used pliers and minimal supplies, extracting rather than repairing. The camp infirmary treated everything from colds to serious injuries with medications and care superior to what Italian soldiers received in active service. When Ferrara developed appendicitis in July, American surgeons operated immediately, saving his life with skill and equipment that made recovery routine. Ferrara spent 2 weeks in the hospital ward, receiving the same care as American patients. Nurses checked his temperature, changed bandages, and brought meals. "They treat me better than my own army ever did," Ferrara told Rossi during visiting hours. An observation of dangerous clarity. Frequent home mail during the summer intensified Rossi's cognitive dissonance. His mother wrote of Allied bombing destroying half their neighborhood, then American trucks delivering food to Bologna's survivors. His brother, wounded at Anzio and recovering in a British hospital in Naples, reported leg-saving treatment, care he doubted German field hospitals would offer enemy wounded. The letters painted Italy as caught between collapsing fascism and Allied occupation, with ordinary people favoring the latter. Rossi read these accounts in the camp library, filled with Italian books provided by Americans, Dante, Boccaccio, Pirandello, and even recent novels banned under Mussolini. The library offered more Italian literature than Rossi had access to in Bologna. He borrowed Manzoni's The Betrothed, reading late into the evening, a luxury while his family huddled in basement shelters. Farm work during the brutal Texas summer forged genuine friendships between Rossi and his employers. Harold Peterson, who owned 300 acres of cotton and sorghum, taught Rossi to operate a combine harvester, entrusting him with expensive machinery. Peterson's teenage son, Danny, worked alongside them, helping with the harvest, eagerly discussing enlisting to fight in Europe. He treated Rossi with uncomplicated friendliness. The paradox, Americans simultaneously embodying patriotism and humanity, no longer surprised Rossi, a balance Italian fascism never achieved. When Peterson's harvester broke down, Rossi spent 3 hours in the August heat diagnosing and repairing a fuel line, saving Peterson hundreds of dollars and days of delay. Peterson paid Rossi a $5 bonus and invited him to a family barbecue. At Peterson's ranch barbecue, Rossi met 40 townspeople, none of whom showed hostility. Teachers, shop owners, ranchers, and their families were curious about Italy and sympathetic. They asked about Bologna's architecture, Italian food, and his family. Mrs. Peterson served brisket, potato salad, coleslaw, cornbread, and peach cobbler in quantities that could feed 20 Italians for a week. Children played in the yard, while adults discussed war progress with cautious optimism about Allied advances in France. Mr. Hendricks, the feed store owner, mentioned his nephew killed at Salerno, then apologized. Rossi, who had fought in that campaign, felt mute, yet Hendricks refilled Rossi's iced tea and asked about his mechanical skills, suggesting post-war business opportunities. The casual assumption that Rossi might stay in Texas, build a life there, struck him as both impossible and increasingly appealing. August brought news of Paris's liberation. The camp gathered around radios, American guards openly celebrating, some weeping with joy. Italian POWs exchanged glances, unsure how to react to their captors' happiness over defeating their former allies. However, this uncertainty felt performative. Most POWs privately welcomed Germany's retreat, having long resented German arrogance and brutality. Marchetti voiced their private thoughts. "Let them lose. We already did, and look where we ended up." He gestured at the recreation hall's ping-pong tables, radio, and bookshelves. The remark drew nervous laughter, but no one disagreed. That evening, Rossi wrote to his mother, carefully phrasing his letter to pass censorship. He described his work, the locals' kindness, and his hope that Allied victory would bring peace and reconstruction to Italy. He omitted his true feelings, his admiration for people he was taught to hate, their values seeming truer than his former ideology, and the prospect of returning to a defeated Italy less appealing than starting anew in this strange, generous land. September's cooler weather brought new work details and expanded privileges. The camp commander announced that well-behaved POWs could attend town events with minimal supervision. Rossi joined 20 others at Hereford's Labor Day celebration, a county fair with livestock, pie contests, and a dance. They walked freely, townspeople greeting them by name, children practicing Italian phrases. Rossi stopped at a mechanical exhibition studying American farm equipment. A John Deere representative demonstrated a new tractor. Rossi's technical questions impressed the man, who then provided detailed specifications. They discussed engineering improvements, horsepower, and maintenance, a conversation between equals. That evening, Rossi danced the two-step with Miss Reeves, his English teacher, who patiently guided him. Watching POWs and townspeople mingle on the dance floor, Rossi felt completely detached from his past. 3 years ago, he embraced Mussolini's vision of Italian greatness through conquest. Now he danced in a Texas town with people who defeated that vision but held no hatred for its foot soldiers. Through the fall months, the cognitive dissonance gradually resolved into acceptance. Rossi stopped defending fascist ideology in late-night discussions and stopped making excuses for propaganda's lies. The evidence was overwhelming. American abundance versus Italian scarcity, democratic openness versus fascist repression, human dignity versus military brutality. Letters from home detailed worsening conditions in northern Italy, while Rossi ate 3 substantial meals daily and saved work wages. The contradiction was undeniable. Ferrara articulated the shift in October. We were told lies about everything: American weakness, German strength, the glories of empire, everything. And we believed it because we wanted to, because it made us feel important. But you can't argue with a full stomach and a dentist who fixes your teeth instead of pulling them. Rossi nodded, too tired to pretend otherwise. By November 1944, Rossi wrote to his family about post-war possibilities. If Italy recovered, he would return with skills and savings to rebuild. If not, several Hereford families suggested he stay, offering to sponsor his immigration and employ him. The Petersons mentioned a permanent mechanic position on their expanding farm. Mr. Henderson at the feed store discussed opening an implement repair shop with Rossi as a partner. These casual conversations, held over Sunday dinners and Saturday dances, felt genuinely sincere. Rossi no longer viewed these people as enemies. They were simply people who treated him with more consistent kindness than his own government ever had. As Christmas approached, Rossi reflected on 18 months of captivity that transformed his understanding of nationality, ideology, and human worth. The boy who believed in fascist glory died somewhere between North Africa's defeat and Texas's unexpected welcome. What remained was a man grateful for survival, uncertain about the future, but clear-eyed about the past's failures and the present's strange generosity. On September 2, 1945, news of Japan's surrender reverberated through Camp Hereford, stirring mixed emotions among the Italian prisoners of war. For Giorgio Rossi, repairing a tractor engine, the announcement meant the end of 23 months in a peculiar limbo. Repatriation was coming, but he worried about his mother in war-torn Naples, where port facilities were 70% destroyed and rations scarce. The contrast with his recent Sunday dinner at the Henderson farm, pot roast, apple pie, fresh milk, was stark and unsettling. By mid-September, camp officials detailed repatriation procedures for the 712 remaining Italian POWs. Most would depart from East Coast ports by late 1945. A few, like Sergeant Antonio Marchetti, who married a local Chinese-American woman, could apply for emergency immigration. Rossi, however, was bound for Italy. His father's 1943 death from pneumonia had left his mother and sisters dependent on him. His newly acquired mechanic skills for American farm equipment would be crucial for Italy's reconstruction. Before leaving in October, Rossi carefully packed the tools the Hendersons gifted him, along with 5 Texas families' addresses, promising to write. His journey home commenced on October 18, 1945, via Army trucks from Camp Hereford to Fort Sam Houston, then by rail to Camp Shanks, New York. Rossi traveled with his work detail, men who had shared laughter and labor with American farmers. At Camp Shanks, thousands of German and Italian POWs processed for repatriation. On November 3rd, they boarded the SS Marine Raven, a converted cargo ship housing 2,800 POWs for a 16-day Atlantic crossing. The voyage was consumed by seasickness and anxiety about the unknown conditions back home. Letters depicted a fragmented Italy, the war-ravaged North, a surprisingly intact Rome facing unemployment, and a struggling South. Many, captured in North Africa in 1941-42, hadn't seen Italy in years. Rossi's memories of Texas's abundance, stores without rations, vast farms, welcoming families, now seemed surreal. On November 19, 1945, the Marine Raven docked in Naples. Rossi observed the harbor's massive reconstruction efforts, but beyond, the city lay in ruins. Allied bombing, German demolitions and looting had flattened neighborhoods. Isolated church spires stood amidst rubble, and women in black scavenged for materials. At the port, the army processed returnees in makeshift tents, providing each with 5,000 lire, a demobilization certificate, and registration instructions. Rossi quickly realized the 5,000 lire would barely cover 10 days of black market food. The promised government support was overwhelmed. By November 22nd, he reached his family's apartment in Vomero. The elevator was stripped, so he climbed 5 flights. His mother, who had received only sporadic letters about his status, collapsed in tears. His sisters, now 17 and 15, looked thin and worn but alive. Their apartment had survived minimal damage from a bomb that destroyed the building opposite, killing 14 neighbors. Rossi found himself unable to explain Camp Hereford's comforts. How could he describe 3 meals a day when his mother stretched pasta water, or American farms when his sisters bartered family possessions for eggs? He focused on the practical. His American tools became his future. By December 1945, he worked at a partially destroyed garage near the port, applying his American-trained skills to convert military vehicles for civilian use. The owner, Signor Bianchi, having lost both sons, valued Rossi's mechanical expertise. Within 6 months, Rossi was senior mechanic, and within 2 years, a partner. Rossi honored his promise to the Texas families. His first letter in faltering English went to the Hendersons in January 1946, describing Naples, his work, and his family's survival, expressing profound gratitude. Mrs. Henderson replied in March, sending newspaper clippings of Hereford's beet harvest and farm photos, fondly remembering him and asking after his family. Their correspondence spanned years, with letters crossing the Atlantic every few months. The Hendersons sent care packages of coffee, chocolate, and canned goods in 1946-47, which Rossi's family cherished. Rossi sent Italian crafts and photos of his 1949 wedding to Maria, a Port Authority secretary. By 1952, with Marshall Plan aid boosting Italy's economy, Rossi opened his own auto repair shop, specializing in increasingly popular American vehicles. His Texas-honed understanding of American engineering was a significant business advantage. The Hereford letters continued, with the Henderson children writing to Uncle Giorgio and Rossi sharing stories of Naples and his own children. Born in 1950 and 1953. In 1958, the Hendersons invited him to Hereford's Diamond Jubilee, offering to cover half his travel costs. The local historical society planned to honor Italian POWs' contribution to Deaf Smith County's wartime agriculture. 20 former prisoners were contacted, 4 confirming attendance. Maria, initially apprehensive about her husband visiting the country that had imprisoned him, eventually consented. In July 1958, Giorgio Rossi, a free and successful businessman, flew from Rome to Texas, driving to Hereford. The reunion at the Deaf Smith County Fairgrounds drew over 400 people, including former POWs, farmers, guards, and local residents. In the modernized Henderson farmhouse, Rossi experienced a reverse disorientation. The abundance was still there, but now with context. He understood economic security, having built his own, and appreciated the Hendersons' generosity, having known scarcity. A ceremony honored the 3,700 Italian POWs at Camp Hereford and their vital role in sustaining local agriculture. Former prisoners shared complex narratives of captivity and unexpected humanity. Rossi met 2 other Italians who had also maintained Texas connections and achieved post-war success, a civil engineer and a Roman restaurateur serving the best chicken fried steak in Italy. Yet darker truths emerged. Camp records indicated at least 17 former prisoners died post-repatriation from disease, malnutrition, or violence in Italy's chaotic aftermath. Others vanished into Italy's displaced persons crisis. The rosy narrative of cultural exchange had its shadows. The unique Camp Hereford experience, based on specific circumstances, was not universal. The legacy of Italian POWs in America, particularly in agricultural regions like Hereford, influenced post-war prisoner treatment. Humane conditions in American POW camps, partially propaganda, also reflected Geneva Convention adherence, becoming a Cold War talking point contrasting Western and Soviet prisoner treatment. American officials cited domestic POW programs when criticizing Soviet retention of German prisoners. The employment programs addressing labor shortages also shaped later guest worker debates. In Hereford, the deaf Smith County Historical Museum established a permanent exhibit in 1976. It noted that about 150 Italian POWs chose to remain in the US post-war, and by 1985, over 400 who had been POWs eventually immigrated permanently, some after first returning to Italy like Rossi. Academic research surged in the 1980s to 90s, with Louis E. Kiefer's 1992 book, Italian Prisoners of War, in America, 1942-1946, detailing that over 51,000 Italian POWs were held in American camps. Flavio Giovanni Conti's research explored varied repatriation outcomes. The University of Texas at Austin's Voces Oral History Center conducted extensive interviews from 2002-2008, preserving these stories. The humanitarian approach, exemplified by Camp Hereford, indirectly influenced modern military doctrine. The stark contrast between American treatment of Axis POWs and Axis treatment of Allied prisoners became central to post-war military ethics and Geneva Convention training. SARE, Survival, Evasion, Resistance and Escape, training developed in the 1950s, incorporated lessons from both successful escapes from Axis camps and the psychological impact of humane treatment observed in American POW programs. Statistics highlighted low mortality rates for German and Italian prisoners in America, below 1%, compared to Allied POWs held by Germany, 27%, and Japan, 37%, though these comparisons were complex. In Hereford, the legacy persisted into the 21st century through annual events and correspondence collections. The Henderson family donated their correspondence with Giorgio Rossi to the Historical Museum in 2003, spanning 1946 to 1994, documenting decades of friendship. Other families made similar donations, creating an archive that challenged wartime propaganda and national enmity. Giorgio Rossi visited Hereford 3 more times before his death in 1996, bringing his wife Maria in 1968, his daughter in 1979, and his grandson in 1992. Each visit was newsworthy. His grandson, Alessandro, penned a memoir in 2005, Mio Nonno, il prigioniero texano, detailing his grandfather's wartime experience and its family impact. Translated into English in 2008, it found an unexpected audience in Texas. The Camp Hereford story, like others from agricultural POW camps, underlined how circumstances could suspend conflict, fostering human connection. These were exceptional instances, shaped by isolation, labor needs, and regional cultural attitudes. The Hereford experience, while not universal, demonstrated that humane prisoner treatment was both feasible and strategically valuable, especially when administered according to international law with adequate care and limited civilian integration. Modern military and diplomatic approaches, codified in the expanded Geneva Conventions of 1949, drew on these World War II experiences to emphasize dignity and humanitarianism. the legacy extended to cultural memory. In Italy, POW experiences in America became part of a complex national reckoning with World War II. For Americans, especially in agricultural communities, this legacy challenged simplistic wartime narratives, fostering a nuanced understanding of ordinary people navigating extraordinary circumstances. The documented friendships, correspondence, and reunions proved that even in war's shadow, common humanity could be recognized across enemy lines. Giorgio Rossi's choice to return to Italy, yet maintain decades of Texas connections, created a hybrid identity honoring both his Italian roots and American experience, a duality that shaped 3 generations of his family.